Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend, the Momo Fanfics, back with the amazing fanfiction. This is series of What If Hiroki Katuso Time Traveled for Vengeance. The flames crackle. The sounds of women and children screaming echo through the streets, now devoid of life. The sound of the buildings around me crumbling. The sound of those monsters, the Namu, growing nearer. They're all drowned out by the ringing in my ears. Live, live, live. Only a single thought dominates my mind as I run forward, past the bodies of pro-heroes and civilians alike as I attempt to survive this awful nightmare. I almost convinced myself that I'd just wake up in bed, get ready for a miserable day at work, and everything would be fine. But then I remember a man who thought the same thing, just before he jumped out of the office window. That man, who was now lying splattered on the pavement, was my evil and abusive boss who worked me to near death every day. And now the dreams, ideals, memories, the entire existence of that horrible man is burned onto one single image in my brain. A single image of a body in a pool of blood. That's all he is now. I don't want to end up like that. I turn down an alleyway to escape the death that has caught the people near me and come out onto a main street. The sky is blanketed in black smoke, the horizon a fiery orange. Crashed cars litter the street and rubble from all the chaos of the fight. Whatever pro-heroes who haven't died are slowly being picked off, one by one. And then I spotted her. A young girl, probably no more than 8 years old, is clutching a teddy bear in her left hand while trying to shake her parent awake with her other hand. Either she doesn't realize her father is dead, or she doesn't want to. I was caught off guard by this sight and momentarily stopped moving, only to see a Namu come up behind her to finish off the last of her bloodline. She turns around, thick streams of tears coming out of her eyes, screaming in both fear and despair. And before I even had time to process the situation, my foot was already pushing off the pavement. My body moved on its own, the instinct of survival long gone, as I sought to protect the child in front of me. I pushed her out of the way as hard as I could, just barely grazing the Namu's fist as it got stuck in the wall of a building. But that's all it took. I'm comforting the girl, telling her it'll be all right, and then she looks at me and screams. On the ground behind her is my arm, still leaking blood. The adrenaline in my body kept me from feeling the pain, but not that I'd noticed it. It hurt like hell. The Namu is free and getting ready to chase us, so I lead the little girl into the alleyway and through a fence, closing and barricading the door behind her. "What are you doing, mister?" The girl yells as I turn away from her. Mustering all of the fake courage I can, I wave her off and tell her to run away before stepping back out onto the main street with one goal: distraction. The number of nomas in the street has escalated, from only one being stuck in the wall to 8 or 10 getting ready to pummel me. I have to protect that little girl. With that, I find myself running in circles trying to outpace the chasing Namu. Their snarls combined with the sound of them crashing into cars and buildings around me cause the adrenaline to pump harder, fueling my every movement. But adrenaline can only get me so far as my weak body gives out on me, my legs buckling underneath me and sending me to the pavement with a hard crash. Within a single second, the Namu are already on top of me, punching and stomping on me relentlessly. I'm already dead to rights, and yet they don't kill me, almost like their only goal is to cause suffering. Blood spews out of my mouth, drowning out my screams. Bloody tears escape from my eyes as my vision finally begins to fade. And then, I hear a woman yell out from somewhere to my right. "Hey shitheads, pick on someone your own size," the woman yells. Suddenly, a flash of white kicks the Namu off of me and into a nearby building, causing the apartment complex to collapse. The woman approached me with a grim look on her face. It takes all my energy to turn my eyes to look at her, but it's worth it. One of my favorite heroes, the rabbit hero, Mirko. Her beautiful, light brown skin clashed against her white outfit and white hair, her usual smug grin replaced by a mix of sadness and anger. The tips of her rabbit ears are practically resting on the top of her head, showing her sadness. I was fighting Namu when a girl came running up to me, yelling about some man who saved her. Was that you? I tried to speak, but the words died in my dry mouth, so I just nodded my head weakly. You did good. You were too weak to take on the Namu, and yet you still saved that girl. You should be proud. Mirko looked away in shame at the sight of me coughing up blood. All of a sudden, pleas for help echoed through the streets, a group of survivors yelling desperately for salvation. Mirko's ears shot up at the sound before she looked down at me. Go, be a hero, I said weakly. She nodded before a look of anger and determination appeared on her face as she jumped away. And then I was alone, dying in a puddle of my blood in the street like roadkill. A pathetic ending fitting the pathetic life I lived. Being born quirkless in a world of superpowers means you don't get many chances to rise on the social ladder. Years of bullying from everyone around me made me weak and insecure. My dreams of being a hero died when I entered that office building for an interview. My days were spent at my desk, mindlessly typing away at my keyboard while my asshole boss yelled at me constantly. Time seemed to slow down in that instant as memories from my life began to play in front of me like a movie. Memories of being bullied in school, the adults turning a blind eye because of my quirklessness. Whenever I would come home, my mom would be there waiting for me. And every day she would burst out crying and hugging me when she saw the bruises on my body and face. I have a distinct memory of my mother breaking down in the kitchen when she thought I had already left for school. Seeing her love and sadness gave me mixed emotions. But what happened next nearly broke me completely. What I saw next was the memory of my mother's final words the night before she slipped into a coma. She said to me, Katsu, I love you so much. Live on for me, okay? Whenever a loved one dies in a movie, the protagonist gets to say one last final goodbye before they die. But I didn't get that. She died the next week in her coma. After that, I kind of just shuffled through life. I wasn't particularly smart or athletic, so I ended up barely getting through school. I got a job in an office I hated, worked for a manager who worked me to death every day, and went home to an empty, cramped, dark apartment, devoid of any love. I spent my life depressed and isolated from everyone, and that's how I'll die, sad and alone, with no achievements to my name, or anyone who would even bother to go to my funeral, if anyone even finds my body. As my vision finally fades, I prepare myself for death and finally stop breathing. Thump, thump, thump. The rhythm of my heart begins to slow down. My breathing stops and my eyes shut. My body is left without enough energy to even close my mouth. What the hell? What is this crap? What was it all for? A tear begins to stream down my face, my vision all but gone by this point. I didn't do anything with my life. All I did was just stumble my way through, half dead. My soul has been dead for a long time now. A sudden thought comes to my mind, and the tears begin to flow even harder. Who is even gonna show up to my funeral? It was over. My disgustingly empty existence was finally going to end. And then something appeared before me. It shone no light, and yet, looking back on it now, it was the brightest thing in the world. A blue box with a message for me. A delusion before death. Perhaps my mind was finally succumbing to death. The secret quest has been completed. The reward for completing this quest is a job change. Current job, none. Your heart will stop beating in 0.3 seconds. Would you like to accept the job change? Underneath the strange message were two boxes, one with yes and the other with no. I decided to humor my near-death delusion and accepted the offer. The words disappeared, being replaced by new words, although I would never see them. Congratulations on gaining the system. Activating the first quest. With that, the box disappears, and I'm alone, floating in a dark void. And then, I lay my soul to rest, and pray I have a quirk in my next life. Katsuo woke up in his bed to an excruciating pain in his right arm and chest. It felt like he had been beaten to death over and over again, only to still be alive to feel even more pain. But as quickly as the pain began, it ended soon after, and Katuso was left trying to catch his breath. Katsuo peeled off the covers on his bed to inspect his body. His missing arm was now reattached to his body, which was perfectly fine now. Still slightly shaking, Katsuo returned to his senses and examined his surroundings. He recognized it instantly. It was his childhood bedroom, complete with posters and action figures of his favorite heroes. I threw all of that crap out when I moved out though. How am I here? The last thing Katsuo remembered was that he died, and now he was in his childhood home. Katsuo figured it was him reliving a memory before he passed on. Well, I might as well take a look around before I die for real. He got out of bed and switched out of his pajamas before making his way to the door. As the door creaked open, however, the delicious smell of Western-style bacon and eggs dominated his sense of smell. It caught him off guard. Who's in my house? Who could be making bria? It hit him. He checked the calendar on the wall, which showed the day's date. March 2nd, 2137. Exactly 10 years before the city was attacked. Which means Katsuo slowly crept out of his room, tiptoeing over to the kitchen. As he got closer, he could hear the sound of someone humming, almost angelically in Katuso's ears. He rounded the corner and found himself staring at a woman in his kitchen. She had long, silky black hair that reached halfway down her back, and was wearing an apron with a pink shirt underneath. The sun was shining through the window at just the right angle for Katsuo to see her face so clearly. It was his mother. His mother, who had died a year ago from now, was standing in front of him making a delicious breakfast. Mom. She turned around, facing her son with a smile. Good morning, Katsuo. Did you sleep well? Miss Hiroki was caught off guard by her son, who began smothering her in a bear hug. She was about to question his sudden bout of affection when she heard the sound of him sniffling. She shushed him gently, rubbing his back. What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Her kind words were met with even more tears. Yeah, something like that. After letting go of his mother, albeit reluctantly, they enjoyed a nice, warm breakfast before Katsuo left the house. It was a Saturday morning, so there wouldn't be school for the next 2 days, giving him the perfect opportunity to take a look around his old neighborhood. That's where Hirota Orochi and his gang of dumbasses beat him up. There too. And there. That was their favorite spot over there. Man, this is depressing. Katsuo cut his walk down memory lane short and just decided to sit on a bench in the park, which overlooked the river. It was yet another place he had been beaten up. What am I doing here? What's the point of showing me all this? My mother is going to die. My bullies will continue to beat me for years to come, and there's nothing I can do about it. Might as well just kill me now. As the dark thoughts slowly began to swirl inside his head once more, something caught his eye. A blue box with white letters was in front of him. It was real. A quest has been activated. Title: Ties That Bind. Quest type: Normal. Description: The system has chosen you to inherit the power of a god. But first you must overcome the ties that bind you to the ground. First objective: save your mother's life. Reward: 2,000 experience points. The result of failure: Hiroki Amiko's death. Time limit: 33 days. Katsuo stared at the words in front of him for a few moments. There were a few people in the park, and yet none of them seemed to notice the screen that appeared from nowhere. This system had brought about a few revelations. 1. This was not a memory. Nothing like this had happened the first time around. Second, the system was powerful enough to send him back in time, meaning those experience points were going to come in handy for something. Third, there was a chance his mother could be saved. Katuso took a moment to ponder that thought for a moment. Katsuo had the chance to save his mother. Who wouldn't take that opportunity? After a few more minutes of examining the window, he looked away, automatically closing it. Convenient. Katsuo was now back at the house, looking at his mother watching the TV while thinking. Let's examine this problem. In 1 year, my mother is diagnosed with brain cancer, and a year later, she dies of it. I can't let that happen. After thoroughly examining the situation, Katsuo comes up with the best plan he could. Bullshit his way into convincing his mother to go to the doctor. But what should he say? That he awakened a quirk that allows him to smell cancer. That might work. Okay, let's try that. Katsuo tried his best to act normally, but he was no one's actor. Fortunately, his mother was engrossed in a soap opera or something. Hey, Mom, I think I might have developed a quirk. Katsuo waited with bated breath as he watched his mom slowly turn to him before jumping up and hugging him while crying. My baby, I'm so happy for you. Katsuo looked down in subtle disgust as his mom's snot was getting all over his shirt, but he let it slide because she was so awesome. So what is it? She asked, looking at him with a smile on his face. Katsuo cleared his throat before speaking. I can sniff out cancer. Katsuo waited for his mother's reaction. She was confused at first, but that look soon changed to one of joy. That's awesome. You can help so many people with that. Now for the hard part. The thing is, after I discovered this new quirk of mine, your smell changed. Miss Hiroki's smile faded. Oh, was all she could say as she sat back down. Mom, you need to go to the doctor. Miss Hiroki looked up at her son. His face was dead serious, and his eyes were full of both sadness and determination. Miss Hiroki believed in her son greatly, so she took his words to heart and went to the doctor, with Katsuo following her. Soon, they were at the hospital, and the doctors began examining Miss Hiroki. The wait was maddening. Katsuo must have spent 2 hours waiting in the lobby. He couldn't stop shaking. The time limit to save his mother's life was 33 days. But why? Was that when the cancer would become deadly? Maybe the system was even real, and it was just some kind of hallucination. But even so, that theory doesn't explain the whole time travel ordeal. Katuso wanted to test something, so he whispered, "System, open." As he did, the window opened up again. It's here. It's still here. I guess learning about this thing is the best way to take my mind off of the current situation. There were different buttons on the screen that led to different sections of the system. However, most of the functions seemed to be locked, the only exceptions being the quest list and the inbox. I swear, if this thing starts asking for my credit card information. Katsuo examined the inbox first. The only message present was the one that popped up before he died. It seemed the quest alerts were part of the quest tab, so Katsuo checked there next. 3 tabs on the side of the window read active quests, side quests, and finished quests. The current active quest was Ties That Bind, with a time limit of now 32 days. Ample time to complete this quest, I suppose. There were no side quests, but what caught Katsuo's eyes was the finished quest. Quest title, Returner's Trial. Quest type, Secret. Description: only he who is worthy may inherit the power of Ibris. While your body may be weak, the soul of a hero can still rest inside of you. Prove that you can be a hero, and that the power to save people is yours. Reward: the system. The result of failure: death. Ibris. The strange name was foreign to Katsuo, so he jotted down a mental note to do some research about it later. What caught his eye, however, was the clear condition set by the system. Prove that you can be a hero. After reviewing the final moments before his death, he came up with a reason for being chosen. I may be wrong, but I think helping out that girl despite being weak and quirkless proved that I had a heroic soul. After closing the window, Katsuo looked at the time. It was still only 2:30 p.m. Barely half a day had passed, and yet it felt like it was years. As he finished that thought, the doctor came into the lobby and called Katsuo's name. After confirming his presence, the doctor led Katsuo to one of the rooms, where his mom was sitting down in a chair with a puzzling look on her face. I can tell she isn't sad or scared, but it feels like she's worried about something. The doctor pulled out his laptop and read something on it before turning to Katsuo. Well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is, we found a cancerous tumor in your mother's brain. Katsuo tried his best to look surprised, but he didn't have to act sad. The memory of this happening a year from now was burned into his memory. You said there was a good news? Katsuo asked, praying to whoever up there would listen that he was successful. His prayers were answered. The good news, though, is that your quirk caught the cancer early. It's small and benign, and our scans show that there are only 3 spots. With a quick surgery, your mother will be good as new. As Katsuo was processing these words, a notification from the system appeared off to the side. Quest completed. Claim the reward in your inbox when you are ready. Just barely remembering he was in a hospital, Katsuo kept the noise to a minimum while he celebrated. After calming himself down, the doctor proceeded to speak again. Because of the location of the tumors and their benign status, the surgery will only cost around $30,000. And just like that, everything clicked for him. His mother wasn't scared because she knew she could get the surgery, but she was still worried because of the cost. Miss Hiroki looked at her son with a guilty expression that said, "Please forgive my selfishness." This look was promptly returned with a determined smile and a thumbs up. The 2 Hirokis, now feeling relieved of their stress, returned home with a scheduled appointment for the surgery the following Tuesday. When they got home, it was Miss Hiroki's turn to give her son a bear hug while crying. "Thank you so much, baby. If it weren't for you, I might not have found that cancer in time. You're my hero." Katsuo simply smiled and hugged her back before telling her to get some rest. The day's stress had accumulated, and they both needed to take an 8-hour breather. After his mother was tucked away in bed for the night, Katuso retreated to his own bedroom. That bedroom, which used to hold the memories of him crying into his blanket after his mom died, was once again a place of relaxation and safety for him. As he got down into his bed to sleep, he remembered the notification from the hospital room talking about checking his inbox. It's whatever. I'll check it first thing in the morning. Just gotta sleep. And with that final thought, Katsuo drifted off into slumber. It was the first time in a while that no nightmares found him. His dream was peaceful, but things were not going to be easy from then on. Beep, 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 beep. The sound of his alarm clock wakes Katsuo up to a beautiful Sunday morning. But he's having none of it. In a half-awake stupor, he reaches for the wall socket, unplugs his alarm clock, and throws it at the pillow he taped to the wall yesterday for this exact moment. For the next minute or so, Katsuo just sat on the side of the bed, staring at the wall while thinking of nothing in particular. I should get moving now. That morning was normal, or at least it would have been if Katsuo wasn't from the future. Even so, he was able to enjoy a hearty meal with his mother before departing for the morning. It was a lazy Sunday morning, and after everyone was at their jobs, the streets quieted down, or at least as much as they could in a city. After going back to the park and sitting back down on the same bench from before, Katsuo opened the inbox and took a look inside. Just as the system had said the day before, a new message appeared at the top of the list, titled Important. After clicking on it, a new window opened with the following message. Now that you are accustomed to the Quest system, it is time to unlock a new feature, the player menu. This menu will allow you to view your current stats, your current progress toward leveling up, your equipped items, skills, as well as the amount of system coins you have. After claiming your experience points, navigate to the player menu to learn about it in greater detail. Okay, that creates more questions than it answered, but let's hope it's able to explain what the coins thing is. After claiming the XP, yet another window opened. It was a level up screen, telling Katsuo that he had leveled up to LV2. At the bottom of the screen, it showed what rewards Katsuo had earned from leveling up. Unfortunately, the only thing he had gotten was the player menu. After finding his way back to the main menu, and pressing the button labeled Player, which also seemed to have a silhouette of his face on it. Multiple arrows connected to various boxes appeared across the screen. Stat chart displays your current strength in multiple categories. These categories include strength, endurance, agility, intelligence, and perception. Every stat will rise by 5 points after every time the player levels up. Skill list. This shows all of the skills available to the player. A skill is a special attack that does more damage than a basic attack. Skills can be used in combination with other skills, creating combo moves. All skills have varying amounts of mana and cooldown needed to use them. Unlock skills by either defeating bosses or unlocking them through job change quests. Progress bar shows the amount of experience needed to level up, as well as the current amount of experience accumulated in numbers. Below those numbers is a bar that indicates how close the player is to leveling up. Job. Owning a job unlocks certain skills for the player to acquire, as well as boosts stats without using stat points. A job change quest will need to be completed before the player can accept the job. Weapon slots. 2 weapons can be equipped at one time, allowing them to be summoned out of the air when needed. Now that you have learned about the player menu and everything included within, it is time to learn about how to efficiently level up. There are a few methods. 1. When someone asks for help, a quest will be generated with the parameters to complete the quest. This method rewards small experience. 2. Completing boss quests. The quests will require that you defeat an enemy much stronger than you. This rewards high amounts of experience. 3. Clear scenarios. Scenarios will unlock as level up and can be used to kill monsters for experience. The higher level scenarios have stronger monsters that grant more experience upon killing them. With that, the system finally stops showing messages and allows Katsuo to take a breather. That was a lot of information at once. Time to experiment. Getting off of the bench, he made his way back to the house, taking a kitchen knife out of the drawer and holding it in his hand while opening the player menu. As he pressed the plus sign on one of the weapon slots, a list of available weapons appeared, with the only one being the kitchen knife. I hate to be that guy, but I hope I won't have to use this. I'll just keep it here for now. As he confirmed the knife as his weapon, he disappeared from his hand, vanishing into thin air. Dumbfounded, he looked to see if he dropped it, only for it to appear back in his hand when he wanted it back. After that interesting display, Katsuo resigned himself to the couch where he thought of his next move. I absolutely need to get stronger before tomorrow. What's the best way to level up again? Remembering the answer, Katsuo opens up the Scenarios tab and takes a look inside. All of the scenarios have been grayed out, except for one that reads, Player of the Dead. There's no description, no difficulty level, no suggested power level, just the start button. Desperate for XP and willing to try anything, Katsuo grips the knife in his hand and presses the button that would change his life forever. Now beginning scenario. Player of the Dead. The feeling of being transported into the scenario was strange. Katsuo's eyes grew heavy, and as closed them, he could feel the air around him change. It felt colder and musty, like how the house smelled when he and his mom returned from a vacation. He opened his eyes, revealing his house changed into a storage room. The shelves were bare, only showing off junk he had no use for. Suddenly, he noticed a man across the room, bent over eating something like he hadn't eaten in days. With no other options, he approached. "Excuse me, sir. Could I get some?" Katsuo was speechless. He couldn't see what the man was eating due to the darkness of the room. But now that his eyes adjusted, he saw the body of a female office worker, her cold, dead eyes bearing into Katsuo's soul. What the hell? He was once again cut off by the man, or rather, the monster jumping on top of him, attempting to rip him open like the poor woman across the room. Ragagaha, an incoherent mess of gargles and beastly yelling escaped from the man's torn open jaw. His eyes were glassy and lifeless. His stomach was also torn open, with his intestinal tract falling out like a snake. Coming to a sudden realization about his problem, Katsuo summoned the knife back into his hand and drove it into the side of the monster's head. A sickening schlick coming from the now limp monster above him. Breathing heavily, Katsuo threw the body off of him, standing up and nearly barfing when he got a look at the blood all over him. After the sight mixed with the smell, however, he couldn't take it anymore and threw up his hearty breakfast. After cleansing both his stomach and soul, Katsuo looked up to an alert from the system. He had gained XP from killing the zombie and leveled up. It felt strange, like his body had gotten lighter and his mind clearer. He punched the air in front of him, noticing his punch felt heavier. As he was about to test his jump height, he heard more snarls coming from the ground. He looked at the man, whose mouth wasn't moving. Horrified, he looked at the woman, who was getting up while staring at him. Ah, damn it. The woman lunged at him as well, but one simple swing with the knife had cut halfway through her head this time, getting wedged inside. He was stronger now. After wiggling the knife loose, his sudden urge to release even more of his breakfast is interrupted by the system, giving him more XP for killing the office lady. However, it wasn't enough to advance. If I want to level up, I need to kill more of those things. They're not human. They are not human. After reassuring himself, he slowly opens the creaky door and looks outside. He's in an abandoned office building. The whole place is in disarray, with cubicles destroyed and doors broken down, seemingly by the undead monstrosities plaguing this world. Katsuo's attention is immediately brought to the broken window. Walking over and looking outside, Katsuo's heart drops. It's not just this building or the neighborhood. The zombies are roaming around as far as the eye can see. Down below in the street, Katsuo witnesses a car crash in the road. A survivor gets out of the car, only to be surrounded and devoured by the horde, alerted by the sound of the crash. By the time the zombies are finished, the man has turned into one of them, stumbling his way in no certain direction. Behind him, a little girl crawls out of the car and then runs out of sight. Oh my God, where the hell am I? As if to answer his question, the system window opens in front of him. The world of the dead. The world has succumbed to a zombie-creating virus. While they are easily outmaneuvered by themselves, the hordes have proved to be extremely dangerous, overwhelming the world's governments and killing 99% of the Earth's population. Objective: kill the undead. Oh God, oh God, oh God. This isn't real. This can't be real. I can't do this. I can't do this. Katsuo pulled up the scenario menu and had his finger above the exit button before he stopped himself. Why was he feeling déjà vu? Something like this had happened before, right? Come on, Katsuo, fight back. It was like he was there, standing over the bullies as they beat him up and spat on him for being quirkless. The bullies hurled insult after insult, kick after kick, until there was nothing left for them to kick. He saw himself begging for Hirota to spare him, having to give up all of his money just for half the beating. He saw himself crying into his blanket while he was powerless to save his mother from her cancer. He saw an empty shell of a man being yelled at by his boss to work harder, all while the boss just sat at his desk doing nothing particular. He saw a pathetic, quirkless, weak man save a girl from death, despite knowing he would die. He saw that same man, who had been bullied and ridiculed his entire life, be given a second chance. Tears welled up in his eyes. The memories were painful, but they taught him a lesson. I won't be weak. I can't be. If I leave here, let the fear overcome me. Then how will I be able to change my useless fate and become a hero? How will I be able to see my mother smile when she's too busy crying over my bruises? I have to be strong so that she, and everyone else who dies in the future to those monsters can smile and live. His blood boiled at the thought of backing down now. So Katsuo closed the menu and wiped his tears away, a fire igniting deep in his soul as the system appeared once again. New quest has been activated. Title: Kill Your Fear. Type: Special. There's no time to be weak anymore. In order to preserve the smiles of everyone in the world, you must become the strongest being. Requirement: kill 100 zombies. Reward: new skill. Level up. Level up. Level up. Notifications of advancement surround Katsuo, heralding death for anything in his way. Determination and a desire to live guide his blade through the heads of the zombies in his way. With every level up, his movements get quicker, his mind gets clearer, leading him to his objective: the Horde, a massive collective of zombies in the city center. Where others would see imminent danger, Katsuo saw an opportunity. He already knew what would happen if he didn't get stronger now. The same thing that happened 10 years from now. A pathetic ending. But he couldn't let that happen now, so he sliced and sliced and sliced until his arm grew tired and his blade grew dull. Level up. Level up. Level up. The rate at which he was advancing was decreasing. The amount of XP needed simply couldn't be met with simply killing zombies anymore. But he did it. The quest was cleared. The system congratulated him. But he felt something was off, like a piece of him was missing. His innocence. He looked around him. Dead boldies were piled up, their blood soaking into the ground. They were already dead, monsters who hunted the innocent, just like the Namu. But they still looked human, and that bothered Katsuo. Don't think about it. Not yet. Seeing that his work was done here, Katsuo returned to the scenario menu and pressed the exit button. He was back in his kitchen. The clock on the wall showed Katsuo that not even 10 minutes had passed. The blood on his clothes and knife was gone, but the knife itself was still heavily damaged. Looks like I owe Mom a new kitchen knife. I'll have to tell her about. As Katsuo fell to the ground and heard his mother coming his way, he came to a realization. Must have been more tired than I thought. Okay, class, settle down now. I'm taking roll. The teacher stands at the front of the classroom, looking at all the students individually to confirm their presence. Hanamura, haste, Manami, Hiroki, wait. Where's Hiroki at? Confused, the teacher begins flipping through his notes, trying to find some kind of absence form before finally finding it. Ah yes, I remember now. He's in the hospital. As he returns to taking roll, the class begins whispering to each other excitedly. Things like, you think he's dead, or maybe he finally threw himself out of a window. All ended by snickering before coming up with something even worse. The teacher hears this, a look of distaste plaguing his visage before a student speaks up. Excuse me, sir, but what happened? He wipes the look of disgust off his face before looking up at the girl who asked him. It's obvious that she, as well as the other students, are hoping that Hiroki never comes back. Children can be so cruel, he thinks to himself before answering her question. He awakened his quirk and worked himself to exhaustion training with it. I don't know. With that, the quiet becomes silent, their hopes of never seeing that quirkless loser dashed. But then, the heckling continues in a new form. Whatever, I bet his quirk is super weak, one girl said. Yeah, I bet all he can do is stretch his fingers or something, another one said. The look of disgust returned to the teacher's face as he finished roll and began class. Little did anyone know, the school's delinquents were planning something. Who does that little fuck think he is? One of them said, snickering to his friend who responded. We should teach him a lesson, right, Arachi? The two boys turned to their leader, the most feared delinquent in the prefecture, who showed off his wicked grin as he spoke. I don't know about you guys, but I'm itching to beat that little shit's face into the ground. Next time he comes to school, we'll show him who the predators are, and who their prey will always be. Katsuo awoke to a white-tiled ceiling, in a bed he didn't recognize. An unfamiliar ceiling. He sat up slowly, taking in his surroundings. He was almost scared he had somehow gone back to the future, but fortunately, that wasn't the case. His hands still looked like those of a teenager. Soon, he noticed his mother beside him, the red around her eyes telling him that she had been crying. While all this information would have been confusing before, Katsuo's newly enhanced intelligence was able to take it all in and process it quickly, coming to the simple conclusion that he had awoken in the hospital. Katsuo nudged his mother awake, who was happy enough to see him alive and well. "My baby." The tears began flowing again as Katsuo embraced her, rubbing her back and assuring her that he was fine. Soon, the same doctor from before walked into the room. "It pains me to have to see you two so soon, but I believe this meeting is very important, so listen up." The doctor's words caught Katsuo and his mother's attention, who began to worry that something may be wrong. Fortunately, that was also not the case. "It seems we were initially wrong about your quirk. While we believed your nose was somehow strong enough to smell cancer, it seems that was only a side effect of what we believe is your real quirk: full body strengthening. Your five senses, as well as your physical prowess, are all boosted, most likely permanently." While this came as a shock to Mrs. Hiroki, Katsuo was more confused about the second part. "But how did you know that my body was heightened as well?" The doctor, who was looking at his notes, looked back up at Katsuo. "For one, you worked yourself to near exhaustion after discovering your quirk, so it was half an educated guess. Second, your muscle definition is drastically different from the last time I saw you. Most likely because your body needed to get acclimated to your quirk first. I didn't notice it before, but my arms do look a lot more muscular than they did before." Looking down the neck hole of the hospital gown, Katsuo discovered a chiseled six-pack where his ordinary chest used to be. "Oh shit." In light of this discovery, "I'll need you to go to your local quirk registration building to have your quirk registered. They'll perform a variety of tests for you so we can see what your quirk is truly like. Just in case I was wrong." Before leaving the room, the doctor stopped with his hand on the door handle and turned around. "Oh, and make sure not to work yourself to exhaustion again," the doctor said with a smile before leaving the room. "Ha, I'll try not to." My quirk is exactly as the doctor said it was. After doing various tests, it was recorded that both my physical and mental capabilities had improved a lot, something that couldn't be done normally in a few days. After registering my quirk and going back home, I fell asleep nearly instantly and didn't wake up until the next morning. It was the day Katsuo had been dreading ever since he got used to the idea of being in the past. Today, Katsuo had to go back to school. If it were 80% of the other kids in the world, it was just a matter of being too lazy to go back. But for Katsuo, it was because he had the worst days of his life in school. He was sure that word of his quirk had already gotten back to the class, and he was probably getting ready to do something stupid. Even so, Katsuo got out of bed and faced the music. He had already decided back in the world of the dead that he wouldn't back down from the challenges ahead of him. With that being said, it didn't decrease his anxiety any. He hid it pretty well from his mother as he left the house, but practically every instinct was screaming at him to run in the other direction, lest he face the same trauma he experienced in the future. But his instincts were wrong. He knew, deep down in his heart and his mind, that it was now or never. If he didn't act today, then he might as well just consign himself to that useless fate for the second time. So he took a deep breath, steadied his hands, steeled his valor, and opened the door to the classroom. When he entered the classroom, the first thing he noticed were the glares of all of his classmates bearing deep into his soul. He could practically hear them telling him to screw off and other stuff he didn't care to think about. He simply ignored them and took his seat by the window. Normally, he would be screwed because he couldn't remember where he sat. But every other seat was already taken, so it didn't matter much. Any plan of flying under the radar for now went completely out the window. Excited by the prospect of being able to answer any question about the material they learned perfectly, Katsuo slowly drew the avarice of his classmates as he answered every question they couldn't. By the time school was over, Katsuo had already proven himself to be a force to be reckoned with in the academic world. He also outclassed all of the athletes during gym, showing off his new strength and agility. All in all, the king of delinquents was furious. Who does this fuck up of a human think he is? I'll show him. I'll show him the trash he really is. The evil aura emanating off of Orochi did not go unnoticed by Katsuo, who had been paying attention to Orochi the whole day, both out of fear and caution that he would attack him at any moment. So of course, when Orosai's gang of dumbasses punched him in the back of the head and dragged him behind the school, Katsuo wasn't surprised. The light from the sun, being blocked by the school building, does not reach Katsuo. Two guys are keeping him on his knees, two guys are on his left, another two on his right, and Orochi is straight ahead, sitting on top of a crate while he smiles madly at the sight of a bleeding Katsuo. The men took advantage of Katsuo being unconscious by kicking the crap out of him. But now that he was awake, it was time for the show to begin. Orochi takes Katsuo lifting his head towards him as his sign to start the performance. Do you know what you are, Katsuo? You're a cancer on society. You're a leech. You, being the weak, powerless fuck-up that you are, provide nothing to the world while expecting everything in return. Your weakness is both revolting and deadly. You are so weak, in fact, that when people look at you, they take time out of their day to stop and help you up, all while wondering why they're even bothering. You are useless. And for some reason, you think that just because you have some lame quirk all of a sudden, you're not a fuck-up anymore? I don't think so. So here's what's going to happen. There are predators, and there are prey. It's about time you learned which one you are in this world. Beat him. The four men approach, all cackling and sneering as they get ready to put Katsuo back in the hospital. But they stop moving at the sight of Katsuo smiling. It's not just that either. It's his eyes. They look different. Were they always glowing blue like that? Suddenly, fighting him doesn't seem like such a good idea. Like some sort of deep-rooted, primal instinct inherited from their caveman ancestors is telling them to run as fast as they can and not look back. But it's too late. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. The sound of Katsuo's laugh throws everyone off guard as he slowly stands up despite being held down by two big men with power-type quirks. Even worse, he's not even struggling. The two men try to let go, but Katsuo grabs them and keeps them there. In their eyes, their arms are stuck in the jaws of an apex predator. They want to scream, but Katsuo throws them over him and into the ground, knocking them unconscious immediately. Still laughing maniacally, Katsuo activates the skill he got from the scenario quest, bouncing off of the walls and ground, leaving a glowing blue trail in his wake as he knocks the other four men unconscious as well. Stopping across the yard from Orochi, Katsuo speaks. You were both right and wrong. There are two types of people in this world, predators and prey. You seem to think you are a predator, but you're wrong. Because I am the hunter. Why? Why am I so scared? Orochi clenches his fists and bites his lip to draw out some kind of adrenaline, but it doesn't work. The adrenaline in his body is from his fear. As he stares at Katsuo in fear, Katsuo jumps forward, running at Orochi at top speed. What's wrong, Orochi? It's time to show some backbone, you weasel. Seeing the predator approaching rapidly, Orochi activates his quirk in a desperate bid for protection. Katsuo analyzes his quirk the way a lion analyzes its prey. Hiroda Orochi. Quirk. Speed Devil. He can make a certain appendage move faster for a short period of time. It would be effective against most people, but I'm not most people. Orochi sends a barrage of fast-paced punches, so fast even that they create after images. But with Katsuo's advanced perception and strength, he's able to deflect every punch, throwing Orochi's arms to either side without stopping, delivering a heavy blow to Orochi's solar plexus. With the wind knocked out of him, Orochi crumbles to the ground, growling and wheezing. As Katsuo looks down at him in disgust, his eyes are drawn to a system notification that stops him in his tracks. Alert. Bloodlust has been detected. Hiroda Orochi must be killed by the player. or else a penalty will be issued by the system. Upon killing Hirota, experience will be rewarded. The glowing blue light fades from Katsuo's eyes as he stares at that word, kill. Sure, he hated Arachi with his entire soul, and he had done the same thing to the zombies, but it wasn't the same. A memory was brought forth by the thought of killing Arachi, this time in high detail due to his increased intelligence. The image that was burned into his mind as he ran to escape the Namu. It was the image of his boss, a complete asshole, painting the pavement with his blood. All of the hopes, dreams, memories, everything now just another corpse on the pavement. While Arachi probably deserved to die, a voice in the back of Katsuo's head told him not to do it. His mother's voice. It was like she was there, comforting a 23-year-old Katsuo as he cried, rubbing his back and telling him everything would be okay. I can't do it. I won't. I will preserve the smiles of every person on the planet. And to do that, I must not kill the villain in front of me. Despite saying that though, Katsuo certainly enjoyed knocking Arachi out with a quick punch to the jaw. Man, that felt good. Katsuo, totally feeling himself after kicking his bully's ass, called the police, told them what had happened and where to go, and sat on the wall, waiting in anticipation to see Arachi dragged into the back of a police cruiser. But that never came, because the system didn't forget. The system has detected that the player has not killed Hirota Arachi. A penalty will now be incurred. However, because the opponent was defeated, his quirk has been turned into a skill for the player's use. With that, the air changed around Katsuo, like when he entered the system. But this time the air wasn't just cold, but lifeless as well. Katsuo was now standing on some sort of black liquid, but it was as hard and flat as glass would be. Despite that, it still rippled when he took a step forward. The horizon was a light gray, with a black ceiling probably hundreds of miles above him. Black ink from the ceiling traveled along the sky like raindrops before stopping at random places at the top of the horizon, and in front of him, a knight wearing pitch black armor. Strands of ink were also coming off of the knight's armor, floating into the air before dissipating. As punishment for not killing Hirota Arachi, the player must now survive for 4 hours against the Death Knight. The knight jumped forward at a high velocity. It wasn't for Katsuo's heightened reaction time and kitchen knife that the knight's sword would have gone clean through his body. However, the blade of Katsuo's knife broke clean off the handle, leaving him with nothing to defend himself with. Shit. Katsuo jumped as far away as possible, but the knife was already on him in seconds. It took a combination of running, jumping, and flipping around the knight just to not die, and yet cuts were still appearing all over his body. Crap. What the hell is with this shitty system? I don't kill one person, and it condemns me to death. What happened to being a hero? If only I could get a weapon to defend myself with. At the thought of getting a weapon, the system sent another message, automatically opening a window to Katsuo's side. Congratulations on unlocking the shop. Go fuck yourself. Katsuo pressed the first thing he saw. A sturdy-looking matte black dagger that cost him 14,000 coins, whatever those were. The knife appeared in his hand instantly, and he used it to block the knight's attack. Even with a sturdy knife that wasn't giving out on him anytime soon, the knight's brutal strength drove Katsuo to one knee. Things went on like this for the rest of the 4 hours, Katsuo dodging and blocking, while the knight remained on the offensive the entire time. Eventually, though, the time ended, and Katsuo's jump landed him on the warm ground, now being covered by the sun. He was broken, bleeding, on the verge of passing out again, but he was happy. He had survived not only his encounter with the bullies who made his life hell for the next several years, but also a Death Knight who could have killed him with one swing. If he had learned anything today, it was that he was stronger, and that he could get even stronger. But he also wasn't the strongest. It was a lesson in humility, and Katsuo was grateful for it. Seeing the sun close to its final descent for the day, Katsuo made his way back home, ready for rest and relaxation. but not for the conversation he was going to have with his mom about the cuts and bruises. I should find out what happened to Irachi. I know the police probably got him after I left, but it'll be funny to see what other crimes he gets busted for. At the happy thought of seeing Irachi's ugly mug on the evening news, Katsuo saw something strange ahead of him. Under the bridge going over the river was a young boy, and some kind of sludge monster. It was clear to anyone with half a brain that the boy was being attacked by the sludge monster, so Katsuo jumped into action. Remember, don't get cocky. He summoned his dagger and used the tight space to his advantage, cutting through the sludge rapidly using the jump barrage skill. After successfully dispatching the villain, Katsuo helped the young boy up. They were the same age, with the boy having green hair and emerald eyes that just screamed insecurity. You all right? That looked rough. Looking down in embarrassment, the young boy spoke up. Why, yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for the help. And then, like some kind of switch flipped in his head, Broccoli Head got excited and started rambling into Katsuo's face. That was so cool. What's your quirk? How did you do that? How? The boy kept firing off questions like a machine gun, and Katsuo tried his best to answer them one by one as fast as he could. Oh yeah, my name is Izuku Midoriya. What's yours? After finally getting the introductions out of the way, Katsuo had a sudden thought. I don't have many. Any friends? And this guy seems cool. Wanna be friends? Katsuo asked, smiling widely as Midoriya. Then he started crying. Hey wait, I didn't mean to make you cry. Katsuo was trying to calm the boy down, who simply waved him off. No, it's just that. I'm so happy. Midoriya was now smiling widely too, and Katsuo helped him up. After exchanging numbers, the two boys were discussing what to do with the sludge villain, when Katsuo noticed a heavy presence behind them. Whirling around, Katsuo was met with, Do not be scared. Why? Because I am here. Wait, who is this guy? Do not be afraid. Why? Because I am here. No, seriously, who is this guy? The 7'3" blonde mountain of muscle seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, despite Katsuo's perception. Even though he flew under the radar, the man's presence was large, the way an ant looks at a human. I sure do have a long way to go, don't I? Confused by the unknown man's appearance, Katsuo turns to gauge Midoriya's reaction, only to discover that Midoriya was in fanboy mode all over again. If he thought Midoriya was fanboying before, then he was wrong. Midoriya pulled a notebook titled Hero Analysis for the Future. Vol. 1 out of thin air and practically begged All Might Katsuo deduced his name through Midoriya's ramblings to sign one of its pages. Getting a glimpse of it, Katsuo saw that all of the pages were filled to the brim with hero drawings and analyses of the hero's quirks. Looks like it could be useful for getting stronger, and also learning a thing or two about the world. After happily signing Midoriya's notebook for him, one hero began addressing the both of them. Now then, which one of you defeated the sludge villain? That would be me, sir. Katsuo raised his hand, ready to analyze what kind of hero All Might was based on his reaction. He explained what had happened, from seeing Midoriya being attacked by the villain to easily dispatching it with his quirk, all while the pro hero nodded along. I understand now. Because young Midoriya's life was in danger, and there were no heroes to save him. I'll say you acted in defense of his life. You have my sincere gratitude. To Katsuo's surprise, the rather large man bowed his head deeply, nearly hitting Katsuo on the way down. He simply waved it off, saying it was nothing. After hearing Katsuo's sincere words, his smile widened, and he went to collect the villain. Katsuo and Midoriya were stupefied by what they saw. All Might, one pro hero in the world, put the sludge villain in a plastic soda bottle and put it in one of his cargo pants pockets. What the hell? After this ridiculous display, All Might waved goodbye, much to Midoriya's dismay. As Katsuo turns around to walk home, he goes to ask Midoriya a favor. Hey Mido, you think I could borrow that book sometime? Realizing Midoriya was no longer there, Katsuo looked around before spotting him in the air. That crazy bastard grabbed onto All Might's leg. Katsuo looked up at his new friend with a smile before laughing to himself and making his way back home. The evening news was a blast. Miss Hiroki wasn't home yet, so Katsuo had the whole house to himself, while he laughed at Arachi's stupid-looking mugshot. He must have tried to attack something because he was being held down in the photo, and it only got better from there. Orochi wasn't just busted for illegal use of his quirk. He got busted for quirk violence, domestic abuse, bribery, and a few other shady things, the news anchor's words, not his. The joy radiating from Katsuo was immeasurable, every new charge causing him to laugh even harder until his stomach hurt. He could practically see Orochi's face when the judge informed him of the life sentence he was going to get. As the news began to move on to other topics, Katsuo turned off the TV and sat in silence for a few minutes, thinking about all the work he had to do tomorrow. School will be a breeze for now, and I can just keep leveling up, and then memorize more and more of the material we're learning. As for the system, I need to figure out this damn shop function, and why I didn't have access to it before. And that penalty mission, what the hell was that? If the system is meant to promote my growth, why would it nearly kill me for not killing Orochi? I need answers, and yet the only thing I can rely on for answers is the system. Damn it. Maybe I. Katsuo's thoughts were cut short by a gasp and the sound of groceries landing on the floor. He turned around to see his mother crying, then put a hand up to his face. Damn it again, I forgot about my wounds. Miss Hiroki took Katsuo in her warm embrace, smothering him while still crying. Between the breaths for air and sniffles of the nose, Katsuo could make out that she was asking him if he was okay. Before, Katsuo wouldn't have been able to respond truthfully, but now he was certain, or at least kind of certain. Yeah, Mom, I'll be fine. Besides, you should see the other guy. He and his mom had a quick laugh before they went to cook another yummy dinner for the two of them. Afterward, Katsuo's body couldn't last much longer, so he found himself dragging his body into the bed to get some much-deserved shut-eye. And yet, Katsuo couldn't take that extra step to fall asleep. His eyes, still half closed from the drowsiness of exhaustion, couldn't close as he thought about everything he had been through. Every time he thought of the system, he felt a sense of unease or unrest. Eventually, though, all of those thoughts melted away as he finally shut his eyes for the night. The next was relatively simple. Katsuo excelled in classes, now due to his increased intelligence, so he spent the time in the classroom looking through the shop, while his mind automatically absorbed the lecture like a sponge. Only the occasional glare took his focus off of the system, but only for a moment. He had nothing to worry about from these sorry excuses for hero candidates. The shop was relatively simple. A few info boxes from the system informed him of a few categories of items he could buy: armor, weapons, potions, etc., as well as how to get the gold coins the shop ran on. Apparently, every time he killed any monster in the scenarios, he was rewarded a certain amount of gold coins based on how strong they were. That meant that the more he risked his life, the more money he would earn. Can't be too simple, I suppose. Even if that weren't the case, though, Katsuo was all in on pushing himself to his limits as much as possible. Any chance to get stronger is another chance to change the future, so every opportunity needs to be taken. With that said, Katsuo was excited by what he found in the shop. He tried on some of the simple lightweight armor. It didn't raise his defense all that much, but it was better than nothing. Even better, the armor was both invisible and untouchable. When Katsuo touched his chest where the chest plate was, all he felt was his own shirt. Must only block hostile attacks then. Aside from armor, there was also a weapons tab. Katsuo liked the feel of the dagger, so he decided to keep it for now. But some of the daggers in the shop just looked downright awesome. Not only were they all stylish, but they increased his damage by massive amounts, some of them even dealing 10x the base damage. Katsuo, who was still in class, had to contain his excitement at the thought of buying one of these things. Looking at the price, he found a modest price point of 500,000 system coins. Katsuo wasn't as excited anymore. He only had 7,000 after buying the lightweight armor set, which cost 3,000. Katsuo estimated the amount of zombie kills under his build to be 125, meaning each zombie was only worth 56 coins, and the prices of these items jacked up quickly. However, something interesting caught his eye. The potions tab. Health potions, stamina potions, mana potions, they were all there. The effects were obvious, it was in the name. But after trying out a healing potion that morning, all of Katsuo's cuts and bruises healed instantly. It wasn't a cure-all by any means. A few of the deeper cuts were still there and would probably leave scars, but everything else was fair game. Miss Hiroki cried again, this time out of happiness. In order to get out of telling her about the system, he didn't want to worry her any more than she already was. Katsuo lied and told her that it was a part of his quirk, as much as he hated to do it. I know she won't like it, but I'll tell her about the system once I become the strongest and can protect her smile. Once class was finally out of the way, it was time to enact his plan. Needing all of the available time he could get, Katsuo used his noggin to come up with a plan to get out of having to go to school. Study like hell. The plan was for him to use his increased intelligence to memorize a bunch of math, science, history, etc., and then use those memories to skip the last grade of middle school. It would require a lot of work finding and looking at every page in all those books, but it would be worth it if Katsuo could find more time to level up. So after class ended and everyone was going home for the day, Katsuo found himself outside of the vice principal's office. Authority always intimidated him when he was younger, but now with the system, he might as well be walking into an empty room. The room was not empty. The vice principal was sitting at his desk doing something on the computer when Katsuo walked in, panicking before quickly closing something and facing toward him with a serious look on his face like Katsuo didn't just see him playing Tetris in the reflection of the window behind him. Hello, son. What can I do for you today? The man looked at Katsuo with a dead face. He must have really liked playing Tetris when he was supposed to be working. I would like to take the test to skip the rest of the 8th grade, sir. Huh. After he wiped that agitating look off of his face, the vice principal agreed to Katsuo's proposition, and the time for the test was set to the next morning before school started. After leaving school and walking back home, Katsuo found himself lost in thought about what to do next. I could return to the world of the dead to level up a few more times. Only 4 more levels, and I unlock the next scenario at LV 30. Slipping into thoughts like this had become a bad habit for Katsuo, who failed to realize he was lost until it was too late. When he finally snapped out of it, he was staring at some landfill he had never seen before. Looking at a nearby sign, Katsuo realized it wasn't a landfill, but Takoba Municipal Beach Park. Geez, this place is supposed to be a beach. Looking at the destroyed beach, Katsuo felt saddened by how it had turned out. Piles of junk were scattered everywhere, some as high as 12 feet in the air. Somebody should certainly do something about this. Katsuo began pondering a thought in his mind, the gears beginning to spin as he formulated a theory. Maybe a hero isn't just someone who saves lives. Anyone can do that. I think a hero is someone who brings smiles to people's faces, no matter what they do. I think I heard an interview with a hero in the future that said, meddling where you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. Words to live by, I suppose. Katsuo looked back at the beach, and then back to his scarred hands and arms. Then, he smiled, before going down to the beach. Okay, if no one else will, then I will clean the... Keep going, young Midoriya. Katsuo stopped at the sound of a man's voice. It caught him off guard, so he didn't clearly hear what he said. But did he say Midoriya? Then, as clear as day, Midoriya's voice sounded out above the junk piles. Yes, sir, All Might, All Might. But that didn't sound like All Might. Katsuo began to creep forward. careful to not step on anything and alert the two to his presence. From behind one of the trash towers, Katsuo spotted Midoriya and a frail man, probably in his 40s, who was encouraging Midoriya as he pulled a fridge along the sand. Just as Katsuo was about to save Midoriya from the obvious scammer, Katsuo stopped once again. He felt the same feeling from before when All Might appeared behind the two boys under the bridge. It lacked the same power, but the same feeling of good and justice was emanating from the man. And then right on cue, the frail old man let out a cloud of steam, emerging as the 7'3" monstrosity Katsuo had seen before. The transformation only lasted long enough for him to say something encouraging before he transformed back. But that was all Katsuo needed. He backed up, content on just getting out of there before they realized he was spying. But in his confused and stupefied state, Katsuo forgot he was on the dirtiest beach on earth, accidentally breaking a bottle beneath his feet. "Who goes there?" All Might yelled, Midoriya yelping in surprise. Katsuo stuck his head out, waving his hand a bit as a greeting and stepping forward from behind the trash. "Hello, guys." His nervous smile betrayed him, showcasing his fear that All Might would silence him. Aw, damn it. Katsuo wasn't sure why Midoriya trusted him so much. When All Might was thinking of how to proceed now that I knew his secret, Midoriya stepped up and assured him I wasn't bad. Again, it confused Katsuo, seeming as how they were only friends for around 24 hours at this point. Still, it was nice, having a friend who would go out of their way for him like that. It was a nice change of pace from getting beaten up every day. All Might sighed, knowing he couldn't and shouldn't threaten a child into silence, and then spoke up. "Well, if young Midoriya here thinks you're trustworthy, then I suppose I should explain what's going on here." Katsuo, seeing All Might take a deep breath before speaking, knew he was in for a long ride and sat down where there weren't shards of glass. The story was wrong, but entertaining nonetheless. It almost felt like some kind of childhood bedtime story. The story of a man who stood up to his evil older brother by passing on his quirk to the next generation of heroes, the power getting stronger and stronger until it eventually ended up in Midoriya. Don't get me wrong, Mido's nice, but he's too afraid to fight someone like All for One. But if All Might believes in him, and Midoriya believes in me, then I guess I have to believe in him as well. Katsuo fully grasped the story and what it meant to be the wielder of One for All, but only had one question for All Might. Always thinking about the future and protecting everyone's smiles, Katsuo asked, "So how are you training Mido here to inherit your power?" Once again, dumbfounded. All Might had essentially just told him that he was training Midoriya by making him drag trash around all day. While it would strengthen his body, it didn't help him at all when it came to actually using the power. And what about fighting techniques? All Might may have been the No. 1 hero, but his teaching skills sucked at best. Rubbing his eyes, Katsuo continued, "You're a terrible mentor, sir." "Well, then how am I supposed to make him stronger?" "I don't know. Muscle milk." Frustrated by the lack of intelligence demonstrated by the man before him, Katsuo had an idea. "What if both of us trained him? You can train his body to get stronger, and I'll teach him some of the techniques I learned." This piqued All Might's interest. He seemed to think Katsuo was just going to complain, but him actually helping was a welcome idea. "That's a great idea. What do you say, young Midoriya?" Midoriya nodded his head excitedly, the prospect of both his friend and favorite hero training him the best thing he ever heard. "Well then, with that settled, let's train you to become a formidable combatant." Yet another beautiful morning was ruined by Katsuo's laziness. His normal schedule of waking up at 8 a.m. and throwing his alarm clock against the pillow taped to his wall was disrupted by the grade skip test. It was only the next day after becoming Midoriya's second mentor, so Katsuo's full attention should have been on that, but he always was a nervous test taker. Even with the enhanced memory and practically 100% chance he would ace the test, Katsuo's hands were still shaking from anxiety. But ultimately, he had been through way worse. so he was able to calm down to a certain degree. After getting to school early and making his way back to the vice principal's office, who surprisingly wasn't playing Tetris this time, Katsuo was led to one of the classrooms on the first floor to take his test. Anxiety was omnipresent before the test, but it always disappeared once Katsuo got into the zone. Every question on the test was easily answerable. Even the free response questions were easy to solve. All in all, the test only took around 10 minutes to complete. The VP was skeptical at first, probably assuming Katsuo had done all this for attention or something. But a quick glance over the sheet led to the VP double-checking that the answers were correct with an answer key. Holy crap. Huh. Well, it looks like you passed with flying colors, 40/40th. I'll go ahead and do the necessary paperwork and make sure your absences are excused from now on. You don't need to come back until graduation. And with that, Katsuo's middle school career ended with a bang. Unfortunately, Yua only accepted teenagers 14 and older, meaning he would have to wait to take the entrance exam in November at the end of the year. Still though, he was looking pretty good so far. From beating up his bullies to full-on skipping the rest of the year, Katsuo was in pretty good shape. But it could always be better, so he decided to dedicate the next few hours to getting the last 4 levels he needed to unlock the next scenario. Katsuo stuck to the promise he made to himself like the butter on bread he had for breakfast that morning. While it did take a while, Katsuo was eventually able to level up 4 more times, having his new quest constantly rubbed in his face. After deciding to help train Midoriya in any way he could, Katsuo received an alert of a new quest, which hadn't happened in a long time. Quest title: Train to become a formidable combatant. Type: Story. Description: The fate of the world rests on the shoulder of one man, but his mentor sucks. If you help out the young hero now, you may benefit from it in the future. Requirements: Assist in the training of Izuku Midoriya. Rewards: This quest was bullshit in every way. 1. When did the system decide Midoriya had been sufficiently trained? And 2. Where the hell were all the rewards? These were practically the only thoughts going through Katsuo's head as he finished up the last 4 levels he needed. Navigating his way back to the scenario tab, he clicked on the next scenario, which was no longer grayed out. This one was different from the first scenario, this time having a description. Scenario title: Tower of Dungeons. LV. Requirement: 30. Description: Adventurers far and wide venture to these dungeons to become stronger and obtain the treasures within. But make no mistake, the Tower of Dungeons is a very dangerous existence. Just let me in already. Katsuo couldn't bear to keep his excitement in. All he really gathered from the description was that people went to this tower to get stronger, which made him visibly excited. He clicked on the button to enter the scenario, only to be hit with a paywall. After coughing up 5,000 coins to unlock the scenario completely, Katsuo was transported into the Tower of Dungeons. The tower was vastly different from the first scenario. For one, it was populated. If Katsuo had read the description more carefully, he would have seen that he wouldn't be the only one here. Katsuo appeared in front of 2 large wooden doors which seemed to be some kind of portal, most likely to the outside of the tower. People were both entering and leaving the dungeon frequently, and just a simple glance would reveal that there was practically an entire town in there. Small buildings littered the entire floor, around 10-15 buildings total, with the ones on the outside jutting up against the wall. The buildings were occupied by merchants, craftsmen, and a single bar which seemed quite popular. With nowhere else to go, Katsuo had an idea. When in need of information, go to the bar. It was a timeless tale, and probably proven true too. Making his way inside, Katsuo sat at the bar. Katsuo got a strange look from the bartender when he ordered plain old water from a bar, but that was the only one he got. After receiving his admittedly delicious water, Katuso got to ask questions of the bartender while he wiped down the bar. Eventually, Katsuo had all the information laid out in his mind. There were 20 floors to the dungeon, each one more dangerous than the last, the farther you descended. The floors moved around and remade themselves frequently, so the dungeon would likely be different each time he went in. In order to claim treasure from the dungeon, small amounts could be found in randomly placed chests, or monocrystals could be taken from the boss's corpse for a large pay at the guild office. After supplying himself with sufficient information, it was time to go dungeon crawling. His journey through the first floor was nothing short of a bloodbath, Katsuo having gone at least 20-1 against the monsters on that floor and come out unscratched. Then came the boss. It was a minotaur wielding a greatsword. Its movements were slow but strong, giving Katsuo a little bit of a hard time blocking, so he stuck to dodging and parrying. Ultimately, all it took was a quick slice through the neck, and the mythical beast was down for good, disappearing into a black mist and only leaving behind a large monostone. As he picked it up, the system rang out with a new notification. The system has detected a tradable item being picked up by the player. The trading tab of the shop has now been opened. Monocrystals, as well as other drops from monsters, can be exchanged in the system shop for special coins. These coins can be used to buy the keys for special dungeons. Everything the system said was confirmed by the addition of 2 new tabs in the shop, one being the trading station and the other being a tab titled Keys. In the trading tab, Katsuo inserted the monocrystals into the system. He just stuck them through the screen and got back 10 special coins. Looking at the Keys tab, Katsuo saw the cheapest key, the XP giveaway scenario, was 500 special coins. Nothing in life is easy. As he turned around to exit the dungeon and grab another glass of water from the tavern, Katsuo spotted a group of adventurers who were looking at him like he had 2 heads. He put 2 and 2 together, assuming they were dumbfounded by someone who could clear the dungeon by themselves. He simply waved at them as he passed by, making his way back to the tavern and ordering more water. Yet again, the bartender gave him a strange look. The combined time spent in both dungeons, around 5 hours, only amounted to around an hour when Katsuo got back, making it 9 in the morning. With nothing else to do, he asked his mom if she needed him to get anything from the store. After receiving a short list of stuff to buy from the convenience store, Katsuo began walking at a leisurely pace, taking in the sights and sounds of the less busy streets of Mustafa. Katsuo bought the items from the store and made his way back to the house, dropping off the groceries before settling back down in his room. I need to put these new stats to good use. Mom has her surgery on Monday, and it'll be expensive. It'll definitely be money we don't have right now, that's for sure. The gears began turning once again, Katsuo tossing a few ideas back and forth in his head, testing them out and ultimately concluding they wouldn't work. Then his light bulb lit up. An idea. A good one at that. Katsuo, giddy as a child in a candy store, ran to find his mother, who was reading on the couch. "Hey Mom, do you have any of those books you studied in college?" Katsuo's plan was simple when laid out on paper. It's the execution he wasn't excited about. After leveling up earlier in the day, Katsuo's intelligence stat had expanded even more, allowing for even more memory storage. That's where the college books came in. If he could memorize math and science on every level, he would be considered a genius in any field he worked in. The one he was specifically interested in was the hero support industry. They were the ones responsible for designing gear to make heroes even stronger when on the field. This could be anything, from suits to arm cannons to sunglasses with built-in screens. The reason for picking this industry was simple. Everyone benefits. Katsuo's overall goal is to preserve the smiles of everyone he cares about, as well as the rest of the world. So what would be better than making heroes stronger? If he could memorize all the books he could find on math and science, then Katsuo could make money off of designing hero support gear, while also strengthening the heroes for the upcoming battles in the future, even if he had no clue where or even what they were. That was another problem he had encountered after reviving. He didn't know anything about the future. It's not like his memories were wiped clean or anything. He just didn't know. From middle school onwards, Katsuo was practically dead inside, useless fate and all that. He could barely keep himself functioning on a day-to-day basis, let alone pay attention to anything going on around him. It's why he didn't recognize the number one hero when he was right in front of him, or why he can't use any knowledge of the future to his advantage, because he doesn't have any. And unlike all of his other problems, this one couldn't be solved. There was nothing he could do about it. So he decided to stop thinking about it and get back to work. He had memorized every page within the hour and still had plenty of memory to spare. So it was time to go to the library. Where was that again? After asking his mom for directions, it was to go to the library. It had a strict 4-book maximum borrowing. So Katsuo spent the next few hours memorizing as many books as he could, page by word-filled page. God, I hate studying. Told from the perspective of Eijiro Kirishima. It all happened so fast. I was walking back home from school that afternoon when I saw some people looking scared. So I followed their line of sight to check it out for myself. And there, I saw a large man, probably 9 or 10 feet tall, staring down at a group of middle school girls while he asked them a question. Do you know where the Springer Agency is? The man was covered by a black trench coat and black fedora, making him even more intimidating than he already was. The girls were quite possibly in danger. And yet I could do nothing, frozen to the spot I was standing in out of pure fear. One of the girls, a pink-haired one I recognized as my classmate, Mina Ashido, was about to stand up for her friends and tell the man when someone else walked up. It was a boy our age, with black hair, striking purple eyes, and a somewhat muscular frame. The fear in his eyes when he tapped on the giant's arm was obvious to anyone who caught a glimpse of them. And yet he still got the giant to look at him. I know where it is if you're willing to follow me. The boy feigned a bubbly personality, but it seemed to trick the giant well enough. That boy was so manly. Something I wasn't, not at all. Instead of protecting those girls, all I could do was stand there like an idiot and make someone else do it for me. Damn it. I ended up walking away in disgrace, content to not let the girls see me. What the hell did I do that for? Katsuo was on his way back from the library. 4 books in the plastic bag he was carrying when he saw a man speaking to a group of girls his age. It was creepy to him, but he most likely would have just walked away if it weren't for his perception. He could tell from looking at him and examining him. The man was dangerous. Not just his tall frame, but everything. He knew, his instincts knew, hell, probably everybody in a 5-mile vicinity knew. And yet despite that information, Katsuo still tapped on the giant's shoulder and led him away from the girls. Bullets of sweat ran down his forehead as he walked along, the giant close behind him. I don't know where the Springer Agency is. I don't even know who the hell Springer is. The anxiety from before the test was back in full force, practically crippling his hands and legs, which were shaking out of control. Eventually, Katsuo found a clearing and led the giant into it. Oh God, what do I do now? What his panicked thought was interrupted by a single word blasting through his brain like a bad headache. Dodge. Katsuo jumped out of the way, barely missing a heavy punch from the giant. You lied, puny insect. The giant punched even harder this time, Katsuo not being able to dodge or even block it this time, taking the full brunt of the blow straight to his stomach and going flying into the tree. Crash. Katsuo left a crate the size of his back in the tree, coughing up an insane amount of blood as he tried to analyze the situation. To no avail, the giant walked over to Katsuo, picked him up, and slammed him on the ground one good time before waiting for him to move. He couldn't even. The giant's attack was simply too much for him to handle, and he lay there, still slightly coughing up blood. Seemingly content, the giant wandered back into the city. At least, the girls are safe. Katsuo used the last of his remaining energy to open up the shop and grab a healing potion, using it to heal at least some of his injuries. It wasn't 100% effective, but it was good enough. The feeling began to return to Katsuo's body once again, allowing him to painstakingly try to stand back up. It worked, but damn did it still hurt like hell. As Katsuo began to stumble back home, books still safe in the plastic bag, one thought echoed constantly through his head. Don't get cocky. Don't get cocky. Don't get cocky. After getting himself thoroughly beaten into the dirt, Katsuo downed a health potion and posted up against the tree he crashed into for just a minute. Or at least, that was the plan until his exhaustion knocked him out cold, leaving him there for way longer than he should have been. By the time he finally woke up, the sun was going down and his mom would start getting worried in around an hour. Slowly picking himself up, Katsuo noticed the pain was mostly gone. A simple limp was all that remained as he made his way down the street. Examining his body, Katsuo saw that most of the bruises were gone, save for a few scars that were particularly nasty. As if all the damage to his body and the lingering pain of defeat weren't enough to make this trip easier, Katsuo ended up running into a boy as he rounded the corner, just barely catching himself when he fell. Sorry about that, wasn't paying attention. As Katsuo's eyes met those of the boy he had just bumped into, the other boy gasped in shock. It's you. Katsuo did a double take on the boy, analyzing everything he could. He saw the boy's dark red eyes and sharp teeth, his pitch black hair falling down slightly past his ears. And as he finished up analyzing the boy's features, he came to one irrefutable conclusion. Who are you? The boy, clearly flustered, panicked for a moment before giving his name. Eijiro Kirishima. I was there when you saved those girls. Finally, the pieces clicked together. Katsuo had been so preoccupied with saving those girls that he hadn't even noticed anyone watching other than them. The excitement embarrassment on Kirishima's face disappeared once he got a close look at the savior's face. Holy crap, what happened to you? Katsuo cupped his slightly damaged ears from Kirishima's rather loud realization. After the boy had calmed down to a degree, Katsuo began speaking once again. First off, second off, that giant kicked my ass badly. Couldn't even defend myself. Should have seen me a second ago. Katsuo pointed to his badly scarred face for emphasis, while giving off a cheeky smile. Katsuo began to keep walking, but Kirishima's hand on his shoulder made it hard to continue. Katsuo looked back, only to see Kirishima's sad face before he asked, "Can I talk to you a minute?" Katsuo would have declined, but the sad look on Kirishima's face kept him from doing so, instead asking if they could sit down somewhere. After finding a nice bench overlooking the setting sun, Kirishima began his explanation. He described how his fear paralyzed him when the girls were in danger, how he aspired to be a hero despite his weak quirk, which he hated due to a childhood incident where it activated on accident and caused a scar over his eye. Meanwhile, Katsuo sat and listened to practically this guy's entire life story. He didn't want to listen. He just wanted to go home and take a nice, long soak in the bath and forgot about his ass kicking for a moment. But he still listened. It's what a hero would do, I suppose. After a few more minutes of monologuing from Kirishima, he sat back down on the bench next to Katsuo, waiting for him to say anything. After a few long, excruciating minutes of waiting on Kirishima's end, his listener finally began to say something to him. Let me see your quirk. Kirishima was shocked to say the least. The look on Katsuo's face told him he didn't care, but clearly he did if he wanted to see the boy in action. Kirishima steeled his nerves as he got up, facing Katsuo, who was still stuck to the bench from his injuries. And then, Kirishima's body became jagged and hard as rock. Every feature on his face that was soft before aside from his teeth was now sharp and pointy. Even the pupils in his eyes were sharp. After a moment, the hardening stopped, and Kirishima sat back down on the bench, his eyes glued to the ground. A few even more excruciating minutes later, Katsuo, who had his eyes closed after seeing the demonstration, spoke up. What are you so sad for? Seems like an amazing quirk to have as a hero. Kirishima's eyes widened, his head shooting up to look at Katsuo, who in turn was staring at the sunset. Your hardened body can be used to protect civilians from falling debris or stray attacks, and it can also be used pretty effectively in a fight. Once again, what's the problem with such a good quirk? Katsuo knew there was no good answer to the question, as he had just proved. But he was interested in Kirishima's answer. It's not flashy. Katsuo sighed, never taking his eyes off of the beautiful sun. Kirishima's yet another byproduct of this ruined society. If you're quirkless, you're trash, and anyone with a quirk that isn't flashy is stepped on by those whose quirk is flashy. It's the same broken society that killed my soul long before it killed my body in that street. What makes you think a quirk needs to be flashy to make a good hero? A good hero is someone who protects the lives of the innocent, as well as preserves their smiles. As long as you can achieve that effect, then you're a good hero. Through teary eyes, Kirishima saw Katsuo turn to him with a large, determined smile on his face, the skin almost glowing in the sun's final light, while his purple eyes shone brightly. Eijiro Kirishima, I believe you have what it takes to be a hero. The tears were streaming down his face, happy ones, but tears nonetheless. A small chuckle escaped Katsuo as he finally stood up from the bench, wincing slightly at the pain in his side. Kirishima rushed to grab him before he could fall over, completely willing to help his savior get back home safely. By the time they got to Katsuo's house, the sun had already fallen, and he knew his mom was probably waiting to give him a worried lecture about staying out late without calling first. At the foot of the driveway, Katsuo signaled that he was fine from here, and told Kirishima to stay safe. Before letting him leave, however, Katsuo held his fist out, his determined smile back as he gazed upon his new friend. Go beyond. Kirishima understood instantly, bumping his fist against Katsuo's. Plus ultra. After dealing with his mother's tears of worry, Katsuo settled back down into the bath, getting the soak he so desperately needed. Plus ultra. Katsuo had become a sort of legend in the Tower of Dungeons. Tales of a lone adventurer clearing entire floors by himself began to circulate throughout the town on Floor Zero. Of course, there were people who didn't believe it was possible, but those who did believe were the ones who saw it happen right in front of them. Eventually, the guild caught wind of this mysterious adventurer. We need to find him immediately. An old man with a gruff voice and snow-white hair was sitting in his office, watching the streets attentively as his secretary jotted something down. But sir, we don't even know if he's real. The old man thought for a moment. Maybe, but if he is, we need his help with the upcoming dungeon break. The rumors heard by my men say he was last seen on floor 5. Start the search from there and find him. We need to catch him before he gets to a floor we can't clear safely. The old man's words were final, his secretary affirming his command and running out, gathering all of the adventurers she could find. As she began doing so, the old man saw a peculiar young man in the street, his purple eyes almost commanding respect. HMM. Meanwhile in the dungeons, Katsuo had quickly made his way back up to floor 5, where he fought his way through minotaurs. They were just as strong as the boss on floor 1, but it didn't matter. Katsuo was strong enough to make his way through them easily. Twisting, turning, slashing and stabbing his way through the masses, he eventually found his way up to the dungeon boss. It was a giant, at least 20 feet tall with a large frame. An even larger stone sat on its shoulder, apparently its choice weapon. Katsuo wasted no time initiating his attack, running up to the giant and sliding across the floor, cutting through its tendons as he scraped by. The giant howled in pain before recovering quickly, smashing its block of stone into the floor, the ground breaking beneath it. The shockwave of the crash caused the rest of the flooring to also shatter, flying into the air with Katsuo riding one of the pieces. Seeing the perfect opportunity, he went in for the kill. activating his jump barrage skill to jump from one piece to the other, making cuts in the giant as he flew by. However, the giant was too strong, and so it smacked Katsuo out of the air, who landed on the wall. In an instant though, Katsuo jumped back off the wall and aimed for the giant, this time cutting straight through the nape of its neck with one final blow, sending it to the floor. The giant disappeared upon impact with the ground, turning into a cloud of black dust that slowly but surely dissipated, allowing Katsuo to spot a mana crystal where the giant had just died. Landing safely on the ground, Katsuo grabbed the crystal and went to sit on one of the giant pieces of rubble left in the wake of his fight. Before he could trade it in the shop, however, a group of armored soldiers ran into the room, circling him and pointing their spears at him. Katsuo, unfazed by the sudden intrusion, merely slipped the crystal into his pocket and stepped off the stone, gazing at the soldiers one by one. They tensed up at his gaze, almost like instinct, but they stayed ready for a fight. Is this another rookie crushing? Katsuo had grown accustomed to something like this happening at random. After his first trip onto Floor 1 being incredibly successful, groups of adventurers who didn't like new blood cramping their style would sometimes try to bully him into quitting. Of course, none of those weaklings stood a chance, and Katsuo always came out on top. In fact, Katsuo must have gotten popular among those clowns, because the attacks stopped after some time. Either that, or they were too busy recovering in the hospital to come after him again. Either way, he didn't think it would happen again, and he was right. You don't have to worry, these hard-working men are merely for safety purposes. Katsuo turned his gaze to the entrance of the boss room, spotting a woman in office clothing coming towards him. Sensing no ill intent from anyone in the room, Katsuo settled down. I apologize for startling you. The soldiers are only there in case you were dangerous. I mean, you are, but you don't seem like the type to hurt innocent people. The woman waited for Katsuo's response. So what are you doing here? The woman smiled at his question, signaling the guards to lower their weapons, but stay vigilant just in case. The guild master would like to meet you. Katsuo was going to decline at first, but soon decided that whatever was happening might be worth his trouble. And so, he found himself in the office of the guild master, sitting right across from the man himself. He was old, with wrinkles all over his face and snow-white hair to match. However, he exuded power, and if Katsuo had to guess, they were probably on the same level, in terms of raw power. However, Katsuo had no doubt in his mind that the old man's experience could easily allow for Katsuo's defeat. Never underestimate the elderly. Mr. Katsuo, was it? Thank you for taking time out of your day to come see a doddering old fool such as myself. The guild master spoke with a gruff voice, analyzing Katsuo's movements as he readjusted himself in the seat. Please, sir, I have all the time in the world. It wasn't necessarily true, but it was close to it. The time in the scenarios was way less compared to the time in the real world, with 4 hours in the scenarios only equating to around 10 minutes on Earth. Recognizing it was his turn to speak again, the old man continued. It would seem the rumors about your strength are true. My secretary informed me of a battle between you and the 5th floor boss, where you came out of it with only a few scratches. Is that true? Katsuo nodded his head in affirmation, much to the guild leader's delight. That's good then, because I'm afraid I need your help. You see, once every 5 years, something called a dungeon break occurs. It's when the monsters from each floor of the dungeon find their way down to floor 0 in an attempt to leave the tower. I'm sure I don't need to tell you how disastrous it would be if the monsters got out of the tower. Fortunately, only the monsters from floor 10 and below can make it down here. But it still poses a threat. I want to request your help in defeating the monsters tomorrow night when they make it down to floor 1. Of course, you will be rewarded very handsomely, and your reputation will also skyrocket. I wouldn't dream of asking if I couldn't pay you in return. Money, reputation, and heroism are all well and good. But Katsuo only wanted one thing out of this fight implicitly: experience. Killing an army of monsters coming in his direction just sounded like a whole bunch of experience collecting right in front of him. Leveling up would certainly make his job a lot easier, and Katuso could trade the money into the system and invest in 2 new daggers. His old one was starting to wear down a bit. With another determined smile on his face, Katsuo stuck out his hand, meeting the guild masters above the table. "I'm in." Katsuo had briefly returned to Earth in order to tell his mom and friends they may be unable to reach him for an hour or so. A couple half-lies was all it took to assure them that he would be fine, and he was back on floor 0, doing everything he could to prepare for the dungeon break, reaching its climax in an hour. Even now, the echoing thumps of hundreds, maybe thousands of monsters making their way down could be heard from the town. All the merchants had long since abandoned their shops for fear of death, except for the bartender who kept the tavern open. No alcohol, of course. Katsuo found himself helping out wherever he could, moving boxes of supplies, giving speeches to ease the nerves of the brave men and women fighting, etc. His worries for how this would all turn out only rose when he saw the makeshift barricade being put up. There was only around half a day left before the dungeon break occurred, but still, wooden spikes and haphazardly placed crates were not going to defend against a horde of monsters coming from the first 10 floors. So, putting his knowledge on architecture to good use courtesy of the library, Katsuo and some adventurers knocked down an unused building and used it to build up an even better wall. Not like the bar was set high though. There were more jobs left to do, but Katsuo left those to the experts since his mind could only hold so much information right now. Eventually, he found himself on top of one of the guild buildings, watching the people work tirelessly as they prepared for a war. Katsuo did notice a rather bright man sitting around doing nothing, but it was none of Katsuo's business. That guy is gonna die first. Katsuo took out his lunchbox, which had been packed by his mother, and slowly began eating away at it, refilling his energy. He could have just drunk a stamina potion and been done with it. But boxed lunches from loved ones heal the body and the soul. Needless to say, Katsuo got out of it with much more energy. Realizing he had a pretty good vantage point of the area, Katsuo stood up and began analyzing the defenses. Everything seemed good for the most part. The wall was nearly finished, supplies were where they needed to be, and it seemed the preparations were nearly complete with an entire hour left to spare. An open field of rock stood in between the edge of town and the entrance to floor 1. Upon first coming here, Katsuo had wondered why they didn't expand as much as possible. But with dungeon breaks happening, he guessed they wanted the least amount of damage possible. I wonder how my friends are doing. Friends? Huh. When did he begin worrying about other people? When did he have people to worry about? Everything after saving his mom was a little bit of a blur. Constant fighting and bloodshed had eventually led to Katsuo sort of making his way through life on autopilot. He had clear memories of Midoriya and Kirishima, how he'd inspired the two to follow their dreams and become heroes. But that was it. He could barely even remember the blonde guy from the beach. This realization brought a deep-seated unrest to Katsuo's soul. If he couldn't enjoy his new life to the fullest, then what made it any different from his old one? Guess I'll have to slow down a bit when I get home. I won't instantly die if I stop working for a few days. With that little bit of soul searching out of the way, Katsuo's ears picked up the sound of the roof entrance opening and closing behind him. Turning around, Katsuo spotted the guild master. "Hey old man, proud of the way things are going down there." The old man found his place next to Katsuo and looked down at all of the young adventurers, scrambling about to get their jobs done while also finding the time to smile and laugh. He looked down at them with the eyes of a grandpa, watching his grandchildren play in the dirt. "I'll be proud once I see them smiling tomorrow and know they'll be all right." The two men just stood there for a while, taking in the sight of the glowing town in the darkness of the area. All those little people down there, each with their own life to live after today. Those lives are precious flames that must be protected. Unfortunately, All good things must come to an end, as the time for war was near approaching. You know where to go. I'll see you after this ordeal is over. The guild leader shook Katsuo's hand, entrusting the lives of his adventurers to Katsuo. After that, they parted ways, each going to their own station. Although he was still strong, the guild leader was much stronger when it came to strategy and planning. He saw a battlefield the way an artist saw a blank canvas, remembering every adventurer's strengths and weaknesses, then selecting the best place for them to be. He was on top of another, shorter building that was closer to the front. Meanwhile, Katsuo had posted up at the nose of the army, being one of the commanders on the front lines. He and 2 other men were there, supposedly the strongest in the tower. The first man was the flashy guy from before. His golden hair, shiny white armor, and smug attitude were shining in the darkness. In a bad way. My, they sent more street trash to back me up. Whatever, I suppose a dirty rat like yourself will just have to do. Katsuo could tell immediately who this guy was. His name was not important enough to remember, but his class. Oh man, this guy was a textbook, self-important, ego-inflated royal. Not the type of royal to recognize noblesse oblige, but the type to think anyone who isn't royalty is gutter trash and worth nothing. Katsuo didn't think this guy had worked for anything in his life, much less picked up a sword. But maybe he was just judging a book by its ugly, disgusting cover. Either that, or he had this guy all figured out from just a glance. Next up for meet and greet was the other strongest adventurer, known as the Black Death. A creative name for someone who walked away from Katsuo as he tried to make small talk. The man looked to be around 17, maybe 18 years old. He had black, spiky hair with crimson-red eyes that shone brilliantly in the dark. He was wearing a pitch-black coat with a hood on it, although the hood was off when Katsuo saw him. His face almost looked lifeless, like this was the last place he wanted to be. But his eyes told a different story. Katsuo had never seen himself in a reflection while fighting. But he imagined the way his eyes looked when he was excited in a battle looked exactly like his before this fight started. Katsuo also took the time to get to know the men and women he would be leading into battle. They were all very kind and humble, unlike Flashy Bastard, who was too busy checking out his hair in the reflection of his sword to talk to anyone. Bet if there was a princess here, that guy would be all about helping the poor unfortunates. Disdain aside, Katsuo recognized the strength of his soldiers and made his way back to the front. Only 5 minutes remained until the dungeon break commenced. The sound of footsteps had long since made their way to the town, but they were much more faint. Now, the footsteps sounded as if they were right next to Katsuo, the sound bouncing off the cave walls over and over again. Katsuo's grip on his dagger tightened, sweat trickling down his forehead as he pulled up the system window one last time to look at his quest regarding the dungeon break. Requirement for completion: successfully defend the Floor-Zhou town from the army of monsters. This will be successful when the Floor 10 boss has been killed. The clear conditions were simple: defend the town and kill the final boss. However, Katsuo's growing sense of unease only worsened as the timer on the quest counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The dungeon break has begun. The system window automatically closed itself as the first horde of monsters appears. Fortunately, it was only the monsters from floor 1, nothing too bad. It was more like an appetizer before the main course. Katsuo led the charge, Flashy Bastard running ahead to show off like the prick Katsuo had already guessed him to be. A simple jump barrage was all it took to clear out the monsters. Because floor 0 was so large, the walls were way too spread apart for Katsuo to jump off of them. So he ended up settling for just jumping off of the monsters as he cut through them all. There was no break in the action, however. More monsters began to pour in at a rapid rate. Kobolds, armored skeletons, large green slimes, etc. It seemed every monster was being pulled from D&D and put straight in Katsuo's line of fire. As the monsters became progressively stronger and stronger, Katsuo found himself having to spend more and more time on each group. But he managed. Soon, a break in the fighting appeared where Floor 5 should have been. The reason there were no monsters here was due to Katsuo's rampage across Floor 5 the day before. The adventurers took this time to regroup and plan their next move, with the guild leader reorganizing his soldiers to fill in for the adventurers who had been injured during the first 4 waves. All in all, not many of them were hurt, and there were no deaths to speak of. The adventurers crowded around Katsuo. Phrases like "thank you" and "you're a lifesaver" were thrown around like crazy. A blushing Katsuo saying he was just doing what was right as his ego began to inflate. Of course, memories of the giant from a couple days ago stopped it from getting too large, but Katsuo was happy. He had successfully preserved their smiles in the middle of a war, and that was all he needed. Of course, the break didn't last long. After everyone had gotten situated, they were back to the fight. Katsuo didn't know it yet, but shit was about to get real. HL. Floor 7 was a bloodbath. Katsuo was surrounded on all sides by giants, minotaurs, slimes, etc. He dodged a giant stone, jumped on top of it, and sliced through the necks of 10 minotaurs before turning his attention to the giants. Fun fact: slimes are extremely acidic. Katsuo found that out when a strong kick had pushed a giant into a slime, its screams of pain and possibly even terror echoing all throughout the cave. Katsuo had no time to process this, however, as more giants began to converge on his location. He jumped, punched, kicked, and slashed his way through the horde, keeping a tight circle of open air around him at all times to keep from being overwhelmed. Jump barrage and punch barrage could only do so much as their cooldowns kept getting in the way of their use. Katsuo had drunk around 10 stamina potions and 2 health potions at this point, and he was starting to wonder how much money he would actually make by the end of this ordeal. Time after time, more monsters, and even more monsters came out of the woodwork. Jump, slash, kill, jump, slash, kill. The blood evaporating off of Katsuo's skin as an unstoppable force met an army the size of a small country. He didn't know how many enemies remained, nor how many allies would still be alive to have his back. All he knew was that he had to keep going, for the sake of everything he fought for up until now. And then, the fighting came to a stop. A giant, greenish blue tail came out of nowhere, slamming into Katsuo's side and sending him to the other side of the small town, crashing into a shop. Everything was blurry, the sounds of screaming distant as Katsuo's vision began to fade. And then he was back. Through sheer force of will and a determination to see this fight through to the end, Katsuo gritted his teeth and climbed his way through the rubble, making his way onto the roof of the shop. He drank a health and stamina potion, not entirely back to full strength, but better off than he was a second ago. His eyesight returned to normal. The battlefield grew more defined and less blurry. What he saw was a massacre. The adventurers had suffered a few casualties and were retreating away from the wall. They were fine in the grand scheme of things. Looking in the direction they were running from, however, Katsuo saw the army of monsters being slaughtered by another monster. The creature was large, taking up a good chunk of the battlefield. Its scaly skin was greenish blue, with a tail behind it that was smacking monsters into the ground repeatedly. And at the top of its body were 3 separate heads, with large fangs and deathly eyes. The Hydra of Floor 9. Unlike the monsters around it, who ignored each other in favor of killing humans, the Hydra was a mindless monstrosity, merely killing anything near it. The adventurers were all hiding behind the buildings now, praying to anything that would listen to spare them and save their friends and family from the thing that was currently killing every living creature it saw. Katsuo, knowing he had no time to spare, began making his way to the battlefield once again. He spotted the 2 men from earlier and touched down next to them. "Okay guys, what's the plan?" Katsuo asked, looking at the other 2 as they simply watched the monster. Flashy Bastard was horrified, and Katsuo doubted that he would still be here if he could get his legs to move properly. But the other man, His crimson eyes just screamed excitement, like he couldn't wait to get into the fight. His deranged smile adding on to that startling conclusion. Okay, let's just rush in and attack. Yeah. And that was how Katsuo found himself running alongside a potential serial killer and a potential serial bedwetter. A literal wet blanket, if you would. The Hydra caught sight of the unlikely trio, swinging its tail down and absolutely obliterating the ground where they once were. Katsuo and Flashy Bastard had jumped off to the right, while Crimson-Eyed Psycho Killer jumped to the left. Katsuo could have sworn he saw Crimson licking his blade too. Katsuo began running up the Hydra's tail, dodging balls of acid spit as he made his way up the torso. Flashy Bastard was no longer anywhere to be seen. The middle head of the Hydra prioritized Katsuo, firebolts flying everywhere in a blaze of glory as Katsuo began running faster and faster, running up the scaly back of the Hydra. And lo and behold, a giant jumped onto the Hydra's back as well. I'm such a trendsetter, Katsuo thought to himself as he dodged the giant's equally large stone and sliced through his neck. It was nothing but cannon fodder as Katsuo finally made his way up to the base of the next. Somehow, Flashy Bastard and Crimson were already up there, cutting through the necks as best as they could. Katsuo decided to target the middle head, jumping off of the other two as he began to slice and dice through the Hydra's neck. Timber. The head fell off of the Hydra, slamming into the ground. Ah! The sound of a royal scream pierced Katsuo's ears. Flashy Bastard was now Bloody Bastard, being chewed up inside the left head. No, Katsuo, who was now standing on his last legs from pain and exhaustion, made one last desperate bid to save Blood Bastard from his fate, pouring all of his mana into a single, highly strengthened punch to the jaw. It worked, maybe too well. The Hydra's head burst, covering Katsuo and already Bloody Bastard as they fell to the ground. Oof, Katsuo held his damaged side, the groans of pain coming from Bloody Bastard, snapping him out of it. He grabbed the poor man, whose lower body was fully chewed through, and began running back to the town. Crimson must have finished off the Hydra, because one last screech was heard before its shadow began to grow over Katsuo. It's falling right over us. Katsuo poured his energy into his legs, sprinting even faster as he just barely cleared the impact area. He tripped, sending him and poor Bastard to the ground. It was clear now. There was no hope for poor Bastard to survive. Katsuo dragged himself over, buying a healing potion from the shop. He considered drinking it himself, not having enough money to buy another one, before deciding to give it to the man beside him, hoping it would alleviate some of his pain. Katsuo collapsed onto the ground. What is, labored breathing, your name? The man asked, using his last words to learn the name of his hero. Katsuo, Hiroki Katsuo. The man didn't respond. Katsuo tilted his head over to look at him, gazing upon the man's visage. He looked like he was asleep, but Katsuo knew better. The last thing he remembered seeing before blacking out was the guild leader's panicked expression, the sound having faded away as Katsuo finally succumbed to his injuries and allowed himself to be swallowed by the darkness, if only temporarily. Quest cleared. That was certainly an interesting display. No. It would seem the successor to power has been born. He has certainly proven himself to be a worthy adversary. We may see fun yet again, my friends. The creature, cloaked in darkness and death, gazed upon Katsuo as he was taken into a medical tent, before leaving the battlefield. Until now, Bloodbringer,